on a dreary Seattle night, with light rain pattering outside. Lisa was still sitting in the living room, lost in chaotic thoughts after a long day. Suddenly, a knock on the door startled her, a wave of nervous energy spreading throughout her body. Upon opening the door, the sight of two police officers standing there weighed heavily on her heart. They announced that her truck was parked illegally, and she could potentially face a fine. No way, Lisa thought to herself. She was well aware that she had parked in accordance with the law, but within her, a storm of fury was brewing as she realized who might be behind this entire situation. Katie, the woman who claimed to be the vice president of the Homeowners Association, HOA. Katie always had her unique way of controlling everything in the neighborhood, from the most trivial regulations to meddling in the relationships between neighbors. Recalling the image of Katie with her curly hair and icy smile, Lisa could barely contain her anger, the way she relentlessly monitored and reported inappropriate situations. From mowing the lawn at the wrong height to using unauthorized decorative lights, felt like a nightmare. But today, the battle was not just about protecting the truck. It had evolved into a fight between the desires for freedom and excessive control. Lisa decided she could not let this situation pass too easily. She resolved to organize a meeting with the neighbors to share her plight. As she announced it to each household, surprised looks mixed with empathy appeared on their faces. They understood that Katie was not just a nightmare for Lisa, but a common source of anxiety for the entire community. The meeting was held in a spirited and enthusiastic atmosphere. Neighbors gathered at Lisa's house, and the air was filled with stories and differing opinions. The tales from each person sparkled like gems, glimmering in the soft light, yet carried the weight of anxiety. Each person had a story, from instances of wrongful fines to being scolded for Katie's petty decisions. There was a murmur of unity in the air, and Lisa could see the light in their eyes, a light of determination and hope. We cannot continue living under Katie's shadow. Lisa stood up, her voice filled with energy and sincerity. We must speak up and fight for what we deserve. Her words ignited a fire in the hearts of everyone present. They were not just neighbors. They were becoming a community with a shared goal to confront Katie's tyranny. The story of Katie was not just about a controlling woman, but also a lesson about power and its impact on the community. People began to realize that they were not alone in this struggle. They were lovers of their homes, and together, they could create change. As plans to confront Katie were outlined, the atmosphere in the meeting became more vibrant than ever. They began to draft a joint letter to the HOA requesting clarification of Katie's powers. Each one of them felt excited, and the initial fear gradually faded away. Speaking out had become a subtle touch upon human nature, where people could collaborate and overcome oppression together. However, contrary to their good intentions, Katie was not someone to easily back down. As she sensed the threat from the residents' unity, she revealed her true nature. In the following days, she began to act more aggressively, not stopping at manipulation and imposition, but going further with threats and misinformation that she spread. It seemed this fight was no longer just against an individual, but had become a struggle between good and evil. Every action by Katie, every defiant glance from her, resonated with each heartbeat of Lisa and her neighbors. They understood that this fight was not just for a truck, but for freedom and mutual respect, for a community they had worked hard to build over the years. And this was the beginning of an unpredictable struggle, a revolution without weapons, requiring only the power of unity and the determination to stand up against oppression. When news of Katie's manipulation began to spread throughout the neighborhood, Lisa felt braver than ever. She realized that the control Katie imposed not only affected her personally, but also impacted many other families. We can't remain passive in the face of such unjust decisions. Lisa ignited the first revolution of her life. Lisa decided to organize an urgent meeting to draw the attention of her neighbors. One chilly Saturday evening, she invited everyone to her home. As people began to gather, the warm yellow lights in the living room created a cozy atmosphere. Yet, it was undeniably tense. Lisa could distinctly feel the curiosity and anxiety in the eyes of those around her. She opened the meeting by sharing her own story. "I am not just a victim. I am a part of this community. And we deserve to be heard," she said in a strong tone, earnest and determined. She painted a clear picture of Katie's influence on their daily lives, from unexpected inspections to unnecessary, stringent rules. "There are so many things we could do better without someone else's control," Lisa emphasized. Hearing reflections of their own feelings, the neighbors suddenly seemed to awaken. They began to share similar experiences. The pressures each faced daily due to Katie's stubbornness. An older woman, Mrs. Anna, recalled the time Katie forbade her from letting her cat outside for the sake of maintaining quiet for everyone. Her young father, David, expressed his anger when his child's essay was criticized for not adhering to the standards imposed by Katie, even though it was merely a child's creative work. Each voice, each story shared like a spark, igniting a fire within everyone. They no longer felt alone. The group had become like a family, bonded by a common pain. The pressure from Katie was no longer a burden to endure alone, but an injustice they needed to stand up against and confront. Lisa declared, "Today, we will not be just victims. We will be warriors. Let's write a letter to the HOA, asking them to clarify Katie's powers and responsibilities." Everyone applauded, encouraging one another. Filled with excitement and hope, collaboration began at that moment, one by one. They brainstormed what to include in the letter. Lisa noted everything that needed to be said, not only to explain the discomfort, but also to demand change. "We are not against the rules, but we are requesting fairness." These words resonated like a vow. When the letter was completed, they signed it together. Preparing to send it off, each signature felt like a mark of their yearning for freedom, a bond of solidarity that couldn't be broken. They also decided to hold an official HOA meeting to present their request. Everyone committed to attend, hoping to make a difference and ensure their voices were heard. The first evening of the meeting at Lisa's house turned out to be truly special. Everyone arrived on time, creating an atmosphere of excitement but also nervous anticipation. The faith on each face shone through, believing that they could truly change the situation. The enthusiastic participation of over 20 individuals signaled a significant turning point for the neighborhood. They planned each segment of the HOA meeting. Some individuals would present their opinions. Others would be ready to answer questions, while those lacking confidence would support each other. Far beyond anyone's imagination, they truly became a united community, where each individual contributed their effort for a common goal. The day they decided to speak out had arrived. At the HOA meeting, Lisa felt the hundreds of eyes focused on her. She stood up, overwhelmed with nervousness and determination. "We are not here to oppose the HOA's regulations. We are here to demand fairness and transparency in the enforcement of those regulations." She spoke with all her heart. Each person's story was heard and shared, like beams of light piercing through the darkness they had endured. The emotional presentations touched the attendees, stirring many to feel unsteady, raising questions about how they had allowed Katie to control them for so long. Hearts began to resonate, and empathy started to bloom. The battle against Katie was not merely a personal fight. It had transformed into a struggle for the common rights of the entire community. Amidst the weak voices that once cowered in the shadows, now stood strong, determined individuals, each bearing the flame of the fight for justice. They had bravely risen from their fears, from the barriers that one woman had imposed. Lisa looked at the familiar faces, everyone ready to fight for what they deserved. With this unity, they no longer felt anxious, only the determination to conquer remained. At that moment, the image of a strong and united community emerged in Lisa's mind. They would overcome this challenge together. Katie, in her unofficial role as the vice president of the HOA, has become a prominent yet haunting figure in the community. The residents of this Seattle neighborhood have painted a vivid portrait of her, a woman who constantly seeks control, frequently imposing quirky and unreasonable rules on the neighbors around her. Katie's image gradually emerges through the stories that each person recounts. They clearly remember instances when Katie abruptly appeared at their parties, criticizing their decoration choices or condemning how they landscaped their gardens. Nothing seems to meet Katie's standards. A gathering filled with laughter could sometimes serve as an excuse for Katie to admonish or critique, reminding everyone that it was not the right way to enjoy themselves. Moreover, Katie is not just a difficult woman, but also a catalyst for negative thoughts within the community. She fosters an atmosphere of tension, where people feel compelled to adhere to the rules she enforces. Failing to do so means facing the potential repercussions she might impose. Every time I decide to throw a party, I'm anxious, wondering if Katie will show up, even if it's just an afternoon of chatting. Her presence makes me feel nervous and uncomfortable. One resident shared, "One can imagine that in a community, rules and regulations are necessary to maintain a civilized standard of living. But clearly, the imposition from one individual has surpassed that necessity. This not only reflects a lack of trust among residents, but also highlights a deficiency of respect and consensus within the neighborhood." One afternoon, Lisa happened to overhear the story of a young mother who had just moved into the neighborhood. "We were proud of our rose garden, but when Katie came over, she told us that the colors of the flowers did not fit the overall design of the neighborhood," she confided. Through these words, Lisa recognized herself. She too had been scrutinized by Katie, criticized for things that others considered normal or entirely natural. This realization convinced Lisa that it was time to stand up against Katie's unreasonable impositions. The legends and anecdotes surrounding Katie are not confined to individual stories. They form a collective image among the group of residents. Together, they build a clear picture of her rigid figure, unable to accept differences, frequently repeating questions such as, "Why is that inappropriate?" or "Who gave you permission to do that?" These questions do not just induce frustration, they also embed a sense of unease about neighborly relations in everyone's mind. The struggle against Katie is not merely a momentary uprising, but entails a self-awareness of the power that each resident possesses. Each of them holds personal values, and they all deserve respect. As Lisa began to connect residents with one another, the pieces of discontent, resentment, and fear gradually transformed into collective strength. Through open conversations, they realized they were not alone in this fight. Amid the white walls of the HOA, the community's voice began to emerge powerfully. They were no longer fearful when Katie's silhouette appeared. Instead, they chose to rise up, not just for their own sake, but for the common good of the entire neighborhood. Katie had become a symbol of oppression, but this very oppression gave rise to a new strength for the community. Women and men who had previously felt insecure under Katie's tight control now found courage within themselves. They recognized that they not only had the right to speak out, but also the right to live in an environment of equality and mutual respect. With each discussion, each small debate, the community began to form a new resonance. They understood that they not only had the right to demand fairness, but also to stand up to protect the good things they deserved. Moreover, they realized that the power of solidarity did not rely on their need to escape the difficulties created by Katie. Rather, they had learned how to overcome those barriers. Thus, the story of Katie is not merely a fight against one woman, but a journey in search of freedom, justice, and a better living environment for all those residing in that neighborhood. The everyday exchanges, the meetings, flow naturally imbued with strength born of courage and determination. And as they confront stringent rules imposed by Katie, a new strength has gradually begun to take form, nurturing hope for the future, a future for a community no longer ruled by fear or oppression. This story has become a reminder that when residents walk together on a shared path, they can create change and overcome all barriers named Katie. Lisa felt her heart pounding in her chest as she surveyed the hall. The atmosphere in the room thickened with anticipation, as if each person held in their hands the fate of this small neighborhood. She blinked slightly, struggling to combat her feelings of fear, but that sensation was quickly replaced by determination and courage. They could not allow Katie to continue drowning the community in her severity and oppression. The meeting took place at the community center, once a gathering place for birthday parties, Christmas celebrations, and many other neighborhood events. Today, the walls of this center bore witness to yet another occasion, a struggle for justice, peace, and the right to live in a healthy community. Lisa stood up, her eyes shining like a candle in the darkness. Thank you all for coming here today. We have gone through so much together. But sadly, we have also endured unnecessary hardships because of one person. Today, we are not just here to talk about Katie. We are here to defend ourselves, to protect our families, and our beloved neighborhood. The sound of applause erupted like a strong wind, uplifting the spirits of everyone present beneath the warm lights. Various expressions appeared on their faces: worry, resolve, and hope. They had suffered enough. Katie, with her controlling nature, had gone too far in impacting people's lives with her unreasonable rules. She had turned parking into a hot topic, and the previous months had lost their tranquility as she traipsed from door to door, criticizing and punishing even minor infractions. "This isn't just about my car," Lisa exclaimed with passion. "This is about reclaiming control of our lives from someone who always wants to manipulate and dominate everything." A voice boomed from the back row. It was Peter, a man nearing 50 with a gentle smile yet resolute eyes. "Lisa, I've seen a change in how our community interacts. We are no longer just neighbors. We have become friends. It is this solidarity that will help us through this fight, and it is something Katie will never understand." His words charged the atmosphere in the room even more. A wave of differing opinions from the residents began to surge. Stories of manipulation at the hands of Katie, along with the troubles they faced. Each person carried their own concerns. "I can't stand it any longer," an elderly woman said, her voice weak yet clear. "Katie has made us feel like naughty children. We have the right to live our lives freely." Lisa smiled upon hearing those words. If everyone could find their shared rhythm, if all these sentiments could coalesce, then surely they would create an unstoppable force. The fight was not just against Katie. It was a struggle to rebuild their self-respect. "We will write a letter," Lisa declared with both enthusiasm and conviction, a letter to the HOA board, demanding they clarify Katie's authority. "We will no longer be sheep, but tigers protecting our territory." As the spark of excitement ignited within everyone, enthusiasm surged to the point that they rose together, raising their hands in salute and pledging to fight this battle as one. They would gather information, write the letter together, and organize meetings to effect change. During that meeting, each person had the opportunity to share their thoughts. Vivid stories and passionate calls rang out, fanning the flames of hope within everyone. They had found mutual trust and a common goal, which created an unimaginable strength in the community. Katie's manipulation could not withstand the power of unity. The painful experiences they had endured under Katie's grip had brought them even closer. Remember, in times of hardship, it is this connection that will help us overcome everything, Lisa emphasized, looking up to see the faces of her friends with whom she had fought. And just like that, Lisa ignited a flame not only in her own heart, but also in the hearts of everyone around her. They had launched a campaign to reclaim their freedom, and its echoes would never fade. Katie, with her controlling and eccentric nature, could not sit still when she sensed that her power was being threatened. The relatively gentle actions that preceded this moment had now given way to more elaborate schemes aimed at protecting the throne of authority she had built. By spreading misinformation, Katie seemed to deliberately foster fear among the residents. She sent out spam emails, declaring that anyone siding with Lisa could face serious consequences. Katie's threats and intimidation did not stop at sending emails. She also conducted private meetings with several neighbors, skillfully isolating them from Lisa's group. Her sweet yet cunning words led some to begin questioning Lisa's motives, filled with queries and skeptical glances. However, the wisdom and spirit of solidarity among the group helped them through these trying moments. Lisa could not remain idle in the face of Katie's increasingly extreme actions. She decided to organize a meeting with the residents of the neighborhood, one weekend evening when they could gather and share their thoughts and feelings about the ongoing situation. At this meeting, the flames of unity began to ignite more fiercely than ever before. On that day, people from all corners of the neighborhood arrived, fueled by a sense of urgency within. A determined atmosphere spread through the room as individuals took turns sharing their own stories about how Katie had affected them. Some recounted instances of being accused of rule violations without justification, while others spoke of the impositions Katie had inflicted, such as approving or denying small neighborhood projects purely based on her personal whims. Lisa stood up, looking each person in the eye, and said, "Each one of us here has the right to live in a community free from oppression. We cannot allow Katie to twist the rules to suit her anymore. This is not just about my car. This is about the rights of all of us." Her words struck like an arrow to the heart of each person present, making them feel the sacredness of their unity. The meeting unfolded with enthusiasm and determination. They began compiling a list to draft a collective letter to the HOA management, demanding clarity regarding Katie's role and power. Ideas overlapped, and laughter echoed in the air, signifying a strong bond among them. They were no longer alone. They were a collective, a community. We need to express our discontent in a civilized manner. One neighbor suggested we could organize an upcoming HOA meeting to voice our opinions. That was the moment when many nodded in agreement, and a plan began to take shape. The draft of the letter would not merely reflect their grievances, it would demand transparency and fairness from the HOA management, emphasizing that the community could no longer foster an atmosphere of fear. Lisa and the group worked tirelessly to finalize the letter, ensuring that every word was powerful and persuasive, while also reflecting the respect they held for the HOA management. As the day of the HOA meeting approached, everyone eagerly prepared. They held multiple rehearsals to become familiar with what they wanted to present, although there was still some anxiety. Each member's eyes sparkled with self-belief and mutual trust. Every story, every opinion carried profound significance about the responsibility of citizens to uphold fairness and transparency. Despite Katie's ongoing petty attacks to distract and undermine their unity, The bond of the group had grown stronger than ever. They understood that evil could not triumph when goodness stood up resolutely and in solidarity. Then, when the HOA meeting commenced, a tense atmosphere enveloped the room. Lisa stepped forward, holding the letter in her hand, the voice of the entire community. She took a deep breath and began to read, each word striking like a hammer against the minds of those listening. They not only heard her but felt it, for this was not just a letter. It was a symbol of the neighborhood's struggle against oppression. As the letter concluded, applause erupted, not merely for the resolute content but also for the strength of the community, which had clearly asserted that they would never allow anyone, including Katie, to manipulate them again. What they sought was not just personal justice. It was the restoration of faith and hope in a truly united community, where everyone was respected and heard. The road ahead remained long, but they had determination and mutual support, enough strength to face any challenges posed by the woman who had once caused them to live in fear. This story had the potential to transform into a battle, not just for themselves, but for the generations to come. At the HOA meeting, held in one of the large houses in the neighborhood, the atmosphere was thick with tension and anticipation. Lisa stood before a group of residents, their faces reflecting a mix of excitement and anxiety. Outside, the wind whistled through the branches, as if it too was nervously awaiting what was about to unfold. This was the moment the entire community had been preparing for, and all eyes were focused on Lisa, the one leading this fight. We can no longer live under Katie's control. Lisa began, her voice clear and strong. We have had enough of worrying about her unreasonable rules and the pressure she imposes on us. Today, we need to stand up, not just for ourselves, but for the values we want to build in this community. The residents nodded in agreement, some of them whispering to each other, expressing their shared understanding of the troubles they had faced. Lisa continued her speech. We have lived together for a long time. We have been neighbors, friends, and now allies. We need to organize a collective letter, a formal request to the HOA to clarify Katie's powers and put an end to this abuse. But do we have the strength to stand against her? One of them, Jake, pondered aloud. Katie has become an indispensable part of this process. Can we truly succeed? Lisa moved about the room, her gaze piercing through every doubt. We cannot change our fate if we do not dare to face the challenges. She responded, Katie may hold power, but that power is built on fear. If we come together, the strength of the community will outweigh that of any individual. Lisa's voice resonated, spreading enthusiasm and hope. She shared her story, serving as a witness to the manipulation and injustices caused by Katie. The anxieties that everyone had silently endured began to surface as a collective voice. They recalled the times Katie had forbidden them from doing things and the struggles they had faced in exercising their rightful claims. A woman rose, her eyes glistening with tears. I felt afraid every time I saw Katie walk past my house. She always loomed like a wolf, looking for opportunities to instill fear and drive us away. The image of Katie was vividly expressed in her words, lingering in the minds of everyone present. They had lived in worry and exhaustion for far too long. Exactly, added an older man. Katie has created a toxic environment. We cannot let this continue. We need a safe and free space to live our lives. Consensus spread through the air, and each person felt as if they were discovering strength within themselves. A round of applause erupted, uplifting the spirits of those who had spoken. Lisa continued to share the plan they had developed. They would collectively write a letter to the HOA, demanding clarification of Katie's power and calling for changes to the unreasonable regulations. The most important thing is that we need a strategy, Each person will contribute their voice, whether in the letter, during meetings, or on social media. We need to rally to become a strong collective, not only against Katie, but also to build a united and resilient community," Lisa asserted with determination. Inspiration surged forth as neighbors began to rekindle their strength. Igniting a belief in a better future, they realized that confronting Katie was not just a personal struggle, but a fight for their community's rights. One person stood up, declaring loudly that they would band together to form a barrier, ensuring no one would abuse power or harm others. As the discussion continued, excitement, solidarity, and courage echoed like a promise. Lisa noticed the worried expressions of the attendees morph into hope. They understood that as long as they stood together, everything else would eventually find its solutions. The resilience of each individual in this meeting opened a bright new path for them all. Ultimately, they decided to organize a follow-up meeting to prepare and finalize the content of their letter. The sweat and emotions had created a powerful flow of energy, and Lisa knew that this fight was not just against Katie, but also to affirm the power of unity. They had each other, and together, they would conquer every mountain. The preparations of Lisa and her neighbors for the HOA meeting were not merely about gathering opinions and evidence against Katie. It was a culmination of their determination, a tangible manifestation of the frustrations they had silently endured over time. As they stepped into the dimly lit room, tension permeated every corner, yet a light of hope shone from the resolute faces of the residents. Lisa stood at the center, her heart racing in her chest. She realized that this was not just a meeting. It was a defining moment for the fate of their entire community. The approving gazes directed at her reflected a unity forged through months of struggle, undeterred by the pressures from Katie. The meeting began with the gentle remarks of an elder neighbor, Mr. Johnson. He recounted memories from a time when the neighborhood was peaceful, when everyone greeted each other each morning, and on the holidays they celebrated together. He said, "We once had a close-knit community, but now, all that has been fractured by Katie, I cannot allow this to continue." His words ignited the atmosphere, and many nodded in agreement. A woman beside him, Mrs. Linda, spoke up. "We don't have to fear Katie anymore. We are the ones in charge of our lives." The discussion became more animated, with individuals sharing their grievances and the painful experiences they had faced. Their words were like small flames, gradually converging into a brilliant blaze of resolve. Lisa could not sit still. She stood up to express the source of her emotions. "I have endured being chased down just for parking incorrectly. But then I realized that I am not alone. We are all oppressed. Katie wants us to be afraid. But if we don't stand up, then who will?" Her words resonated in the hearts of everyone present. They began to understand that this fight was not just personal. It was a battle for justice, for the future of their neighborhood. After several hours of discussion, the idea of sending a joint letter to the HOA took shape. The group worked together to write the letter, listing their complaints about Katie's abuse of power, while also requesting an official meeting with the HOA to clarify the rules that Katie had imposed. No one was left behind. Each person contributed a piece, from the wording to their genuine emotions. As soon as the letter was completed, one of them stood up, volunteering to deliver it to the HOA. This was the first step in their fight, a bold, symbolic move. They were not only standing up for themselves, but also setting an example for others who might feel oppressed. The HOA meeting was approaching, and everyone felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Tension and worry hung in the air, but so did a sense of pride. They had collectively overcome challenges, and now it was time to demonstrate their united strength. Days filled with eager anticipation passed, and finally, The HOA meeting took place. The residents had meticulously prepared with ample evidence, documents, and the letters they had written. As the surroundings began to fill, Lisa observed the determination in each person's eyes, each carrying a substantial responsibility on their shoulders. At the meeting, the HOA members began to listen, under the sparkling lights, heartfelt speeches, genuine stories, and residents' concerns were gradually voiced. The flames of solidarity flared continuously between the HOA representatives and the residents, although some dissenting opinions emerged. The strength of the resilient citizens rendered those contrary voices insignificant. When it was Lisa's turn to speak, she stood straight, her confident gaze locked onto the HOA members. "We are not here merely to reflect on the unreasonable rules of one person. We are here for the survival of a community that needs harmony, equality, and mutual respect. We stand up to protect these values." Her words rang like a clarion call, resonating within many hearts. Those who had previously felt anxious under Katie's oppression now found the motivation to speak up. Their struggle was no longer merely against Katie. It had become a fight for their own rights. Before the meeting concluded, the HOA representative promised to thoroughly examine the issues raised by the residents. This was a positive sign. But the true significance lay in the fact that the residents had discovered their strength, learning to stand up for themselves and for each other. Ultimately, as the meeting came to a close, solidarity spread like a powerful wave. People from different backgrounds, carrying different pains, now stood together. They had crafted a narrative not just about fighting against Katie, but about the power of community. Their journey was still long, but one thing was certain on the road ahead: they were no longer isolated individuals. They were a community, a family, and that was the most precious thing they had gained in this struggle. When Katie stepped down from her position as the vice president of the HOA, it felt as though a tremendous burden had been lifted from the shoulders of the residents. While this victory left many feeling as though they stood atop a peak of triumph, Katie's departure also stirred within them a multitude of introspective thoughts and complex emotions that they could not deny. Katie had been an inseparable part of this community, albeit not always in a pleasant manner. Her image was often associated with tense meetings, rigid regulations, and the fear that the allure of power engendered. Familiar faces around the neighborhood, from the elderly woman next door to the guy fixing his car in the garage, often smiled as they recalled incidents where Katie attempted to impose her opinions upon them. They remembered the heated confrontations during HOA meetings, where she always seemed to steer discussions with a hint of arrogance and undeniable stubbornness. Katie's departure not only ushered in a sense of peace, but also raised questions about responsibility and their future in this community. They wondered who would step into her shoes. Would others emerge, continuing the pointless battles and jeopardizing the spirit of unity they had just forged? These reflections sparked a lively conversation in a corner of the garden. Lisa, the one who had spearheaded the battle against Katie, gathered her friends and neighbors to discuss what lay ahead. The atmosphere had shifted, with Katie no longer present. Laughter, cheers, and animated discussions replaced the timid, surreptitious glances of admiration. "We need to ensure that what happened never happens again." Lisa began the meeting. "This isn't just a personal battle against one woman, it's a struggle for freedom and fairness in our community." Feeling the gravity of the situation, everyone agreed that they could not allow anyone, regardless of who they might be, to harm this newfound unity again. They discussed new regulations to be implemented, not only to prevent the abuse of power but also to create a healthier environment where everyone had a voice. Ideas about organizing social events, regular gatherings to foster sharing and bonding, were proposed and discussed. "We must tell our story," one of them suggested, "not just for those currently here, but for future generations, so that no one forgets the lesson about the power dynamic Katie tried to impose on us." As the meeting lengthened, their spirit of solidarity grew ever stronger. Each person expressed their individual thoughts and ideas, yet all shared a common aspiration to bring peace and happiness to the neighborhood. They understood that despite having overcome a significant challenge, the work ahead would not be easy. They needed to establish a solid foundation for the future, one where every individual could raise their voice without fear. Time passed, and the meeting concluded with specific plans to be enacted in the coming days. Lisa and her friends decided to organize a communal cooking event, where not only would people have the chance to socialize, but also to hone their culinary skills and collaborate to create delicious dishes. The idea of a garden festival, where they could plant, garden, and share seedlings, was met with much enthusiasm. As these events began to unfold, the atmosphere of the neighborhood gradually transformed. Smiles, laughter, and the serene corners of their gatherings forged a connection that Katie could never have broken. No longer were there distances between families. Instead, there was friendship and mutual support. A summer filled with light, along with memories of Katie, transformed into humorous tales that now formed an inseparable part of their recollections. Many embraced the shared activities, gradually rebuilding a warm, friendly community. This not only helped them easily forget the unpleasant memories of Katie, but also allowed them to recognize the value of solidarity. Even when residents inevitably encountered differences in tastes or opinions, they no longer feared confrontations. Instead, they learned to respect diversity, listen to and understand one another better, which in turn strengthened friendships and constructed a community where everyone felt they belonged. Ultimately, after months of effort, they had created a living space that was not merely a neighborhood, but a large family, where everyone could freely thrive without fear of oppression. The memory of Katie, from a controlling figure to one best left forgotten, became a lesson for them to cherish and preserve what they had built together. In a spirit of joy and hope, Lisa and her neighbors tended to the garden they had nurtured, symbolizing the strength of their community. Over time, it became more than just a piece of land for planting. It stood as a symbol of unity and affection, a testament to what they had endured and the beautiful things they had constructed together. The lessons learned from the struggle against Katie remained etched in their minds, a reminder that true strength lies not in controlling others, but in supporting and loving one another. The battle against Katie was not merely a confrontation between individuals and a tyrannical leader, but rather a long journey that united all the residents of the neighborhood. The ultimate victory was not just achieved on the HOA meeting stage, but deep within the hearts of each resident, where they felt the power of solidarity and courage. This event became a valuable lesson not just for them, but for all who have ever faced oppression. Whenever reflecting back, every member of the community recalls the decisive moments, those instances when they stood together, teachers and students steadfast, fighting for a common ideal. They realized that strength does not stem from power or control, but from perseverance, change, and the spirit of human solidarity. When an individual dares to stand up and voice their concerns, there will always be others willing to stand shoulder to shoulder. Katie, who had once been an obsession, has now become an exiled politician, stripped of power yet still living on in the community's memory. The stories of how she manipulated and imposed her will on the people have turned into lessons for future generations. They understood the importance of remembering not only the negativity, but also the strength they exhibited when they stood up against oppressive principles. This event formed a philosophy that no one can thrive in the shadows of power without the consent of those they impact. The profound lesson from that struggle lies in the understanding that sometimes power is not something that can be held indefinitely. Those like Katie often forget that control can only be maintained with the consensus of others. When that consensus dissipates, manipulators quickly find themselves in isolation and impotence. In contrast, the residents of the neighborhood ignited a spirit of proactivity, sharing, and compassion, creating a new portrait for the community. As the women in the neighborhood began to engage more actively, organizing events to bring everyone together, they realized that each individual played a valuable role. Small gatherings, breakfast, coffee meetings, and volunteer activities not only strengthened the relationships among the residents, but also created a space filled with respect and love. They learned that it is in those simple moments that joy and mutual understanding are born. At the same time, the story of Katie serves as a reminder that forgiveness is also a crucial part of the journey forward. Of course, the pain from control and abuse of power still lingers, but living in the past cannot bring about anything good for the future. Moreover, forgiveness does not mean forgetting. It means accepting what has happened and learning from it. When Katie left the neighborhood, the residents did not watch her departure with satisfaction, but rather with a sense of relief. They understood that what mattered more was that they had built a culture of unity and a peaceful environment that no one could destroy. They learned to work together, starting with the smallest of matters, and that became the launching pad for future successes. With that spirit, the neighborhood began to establish new traditions, where friendship and solidarity were nurtured over the years. Activities such as organizing summer festivals and anniversary celebrations of the neighborhood became hallmark cultural events, moments for everyone to celebrate the values they had concentrated on preserving. They remembered the hard times to ensure that they did not forget the ways in which they had overcome challenges. The story of the battle against Katie serves not only as a reminder of past life, but also as a new chapter in the journey of building the future. It nurtures the hopes and aspirations of each person for a place they can belong to, a community where support, friendship, and mutual respect abound. These elements forge a lasting strength that no force can shake. Ultimately, the story has created a legacy, not just for the neighborhood, but for all those on the journey to seek justice and equality. They demonstrated that with courage, unity, and perseverance, all aspects of life can be changed for the better. Their story became an inspiration for future generations, reminding them that freedom and justice are not innate but must be built with the sweat, tears, and resolve of many. After Katie left the neighborhood, the atmosphere seemed to lighten. The residents felt as if a storm had passed, leaving behind light and tranquility for the community. They had endured a difficult journey, yet they refused to let the scars of pain diminish their strength. Instead, that experience fortified the spirit of unity among them. At first, the sense of emptiness following Katie's departure felt like an invisible void. The trees lining the street seemed soaked with the tears of memories from unhappy days, under the rule of a cold and indifferent woman. But then, after a period of silent sorrow, they realized that the very freedom Katie had left behind was an opportunity for reconstruction. Life began to change in ways the people had never dared to dream before. Lisa, who had led the fight against Katie, decided to organize community gatherings. The first event was a picnic in the park, where everyone brought their favorite dishes and shared joyful stories. Laughter rang out like a harmonious melody. The bright sunshine illuminated glowing faces, and the sound of shared joy made the atmosphere feel warm and inviting. Throughout the picnic, they found joy not only in the food, but also in conversations. Children ran and played together, while adults shared gardening tips cooking secrets, and even personal hobbies. People realized that it was this genuine connection that made the neighborhood vibrant and lovable. This event quickly became an annual tradition, where residents came together to host parties, cultural festivals, and gatherings. They transformed public spaces into meeting places for friendship, sharing, and mutual support. Groups formed, ranging from gardening enthusiasts to art lovers, all having the opportunity to connect and grow. Importantly, through each event, it was not just about socializing. They also collaboratively addressed issues in the neighborhood that had previously been buried under Katie's oppression. They felt a greater responsibility for their living environment, and a sense of community began to awaken strongly. Vibrant flowers were planted, shadowy corners were improved, and living spaces were rearranged into lush green areas where everyone could enjoy fresh air. Alongside the joyful activities, Lisa and her group also decided to dedicate time to charitable projects. They constantly sought opportunities to help those in need outside their community. Their compassion and kindness were not limited to neighbors, but extended throughout the surrounding areas. They organized fundraising events, attracting attention and participation from others, to assist those struggling in life. On the surface, these appeared to be ordinary activities, but deep down, they were causing monumental changes in how people perceived one another. Conversations that once only included greetings or discussions about the weather had become more profound. They started to understand each other better, and that was the power they had generated from their stand against Katie's oppression. Never before had the connections become so strong. Now, they were not just neighbors, but true friends, always ready to stand by each other in difficult moments as well as in joyous times. From small parties to moments of encouragement when someone faced setbacks in work or life. A year after Katie's departure, the neighborhood had transformed completely. The houses were no longer monochrome. They were adorned with a rainbow of flowers, laughter, and cheerful conversations. Even the music from the parties resonated far and wide, signaling that this place was more vibrant than ever. On the path they had created, people often recalled the lessons learned from the fight against Katie. They remembered that nothing is unchangeable if everyone makes an effort together. They had stepped out of the shadows and asserted their power, not only in building a better community but also in recognizing the value of solidarity. Every evening, the streetlights flickered on like stars in the sky, and the neighborhood turned into a haven of peace and happiness. No one felt fear or anxiety about unreasonable rules anymore. They had become the key players in crafting a new story, one in which everyone was always heard and valued. It was certain that, with faith and love, they had written a new chapter for their lives, one where each resident was an important part of the larger picture called community. Finally, Katie's struggle against oppression was not just the resistance of a group of residents, but a journey of discovering the power of community. After Katie left, the neighborhood blossomed with new hopes, and the neighbors began to realize that true strength does not lie in control or oppression, but in solidarity and mutual support. Instead of leaving deep wounds, the struggle became a glue that bound people together. They organized social events, aiming to create a friendly and warm atmosphere. From movie nights to outdoor BBQs and workshops on art and culture, everyone began to understand each other better. The laughter, friendly glances, and handshakes reinforced the bonds between the girls and families. They not only organized events but also collaborated on community projects. A garden was established from the caring hands of the entire neighborhood. People discussed and contributed to purchase seeds, fertilizers, and design the garden in the way they desired. No longer a power struggle, it became a celebration of love for the living space and for the people around them. Then, laughter echoed through the neighborhood once again. Every Sunday afternoon, families gathered for a small party at the nearby park, where many had previously only dared to walk by. They sat together, sharing food, stories, and dreams for the future. From those simple yet meaningful moments, the neighborhood gradually transformed into a place where people not only lived, but also felt like family. Once, Lisa shared, "We used to live under the threat of one individual, but now we have learned that strength lies not in control, but in sharing." It was a moment that touched everyone's hearts, her simple words containing a profound philosophy of life. And in the light of summer evenings, as the sunset illuminated the garden full of flowers, people realized that they had built a common home together. The neighborhood was no longer dominated by one individual, but was a close-knit community where everyone experienced, shared, and supported one another. The final project they undertook that summer was to create a time bank, an idea where everyone could give each other time, such as helping with household chores, taking care of children, or running errands in daily life. Each person could contribute their time and receive support from others when needed. This idea was not only a useful form of exchange, but also spread a deeper spirit of solidarity. Months later, as autumn approached, they organized a fall festival featuring activities like harvesting, decorating leaves, and roasting chestnuts. This was not only a festival, but also their acknowledgement of what they had overcome, and a celebration of the spiritual values they had built. The laughter, sparkling eyes, and warm hugs transformed the event into a beautiful memory, marking a turning point for the community. The solidarity they experienced in their struggle against Katie was no longer a painful memory, but the foundation for enduring relationships in the future. They had learned that, from difficult challenges, the weak could become leaders. True guides, friendships, mutual support, and perseverance nurtured them, helping them overcome any obstacles. As a concluding part to this story, they reflected on what they had gone through and felt grateful for all the lessons life had taught them. They had built a community that was not only sustainable, but also deeply humane. They still remembered Katie, but now her memory was no longer one of fear, but a motivation for them to continue protecting their solidarity and supporting each other in the months to come. Their lives had become a testament to what they had learned: the power of community is the greatest value that anyone can possess. The story of the struggle against Katie culminated in a triumphant expression of unity and courage. The residents of the neighborhood not only changed an unjust status quo, but also ignited a strong sense of community that transcended personal conflicts. After Katie stepped down from her leadership position, the atmosphere in the neighborhood gradually became more peaceful and warm. Small parties were organized. Intimate gatherings among neighbors occurred frequently, transforming the initially cold and sparse streets into a place filled with laughter and joyous conversations. Outdoor parties and hearty potluck dinners became staples in the daily rhythm of life for the residents. Lisa, with her passion and leadership spirit, emerged as an essential connector in community activities. She proposed the idea of creating a communal garden, a space where everyone could come together to work, share experiences, and better understand one another. The garden was more than just a patch of land for planting. It became a symbol of unity and perseverance among the residents. Neighbors who once knew each other only through a few casual greetings now unhesitatingly shared their everyday stories, joys, sorrows, and unfulfilled dreams. They forged a strong bond, not only through extracurricular activities, but also through mutual understanding and respect. The solidarity displayed during difficult days became the cornerstone for gatherings where people could listen to and learn from each other's life experiences. Moreover, the strength of this community spirit helped them face new challenges. When a fierce storm unexpectedly struck the neighborhood, no one was left alone. Everyone came together to support and assist each other in cleaning up and repairing the damages caused by the disaster. Those moments not only reaffirmed the value of friendship, but also educated future generations about the power of solidarity. Under the warm glow of those sunlit afternoons, the garden they nurtured together began to flourish. The seedlings, planted by each person's hands, manifested into vibrant blossoms and sweet fruits. The garden was not merely a source of food, but also a place for interaction, where everyone shared their efforts and dedication. They created a valuable legacy, not only for themselves, but also for generations to come. Looking back, the hardships they overcame tell not just the story of a fight against an individual abusing their power. It is a lesson in resilience, demonstrating how a community can rise to defend its rights. The community taught each member that true strength lies in the relationships they build, and that once united, nothing could stand in their way. Though Katie had departed, her shadow lingered, not as a source of fear, but as a reminder to all that power should not be built on fear or oppression. Katie, by her actions, became a symbol of control and injustice, and the uprising of the community illuminated the true value of freedom. Ultimately, the story does not merely conclude with a struggle for power. It is also a journey of growth and transformation. Women like Lisa and her neighbors learned that they could stand up, voice their opinions, and together, they could change the injustices around them. They evolved into a resilient community where each individual could express themselves without fear. The new light they created after the long, dark nights was not just a beacon for the present, but also a hope for the future. Together, they built a world in which everyone had a voice, was respected, and above all, loved as members of a larger family. In this way, this story teaches us not only about unity and courage, but also reminds each person that the journey toward building a strong, simple, and happy community begins with the relentless determination of every individual, forever filled with hope and an unwavering spirit of perseverance. They learned that life, no matter how many challenges it presents, is always worth living and will remain vibrant as long as love and solidarity accompany them.